Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary with a knife video. Today I've got a comparison. It should be a really fun comparison to do. One of the knives I've got here is the Lionsteel TM1 and the other is the Cold Steel Ultimate Hunter. Now, the biggest difference between these two is price point, okay? And what I'd like to hear from you guys is some comments about that. You know, do you have a magic price point that you never cross? Are you biased? Okay, would you say, you know, all of my knives have to be over $150, or all of my knives have to be over $200, or all of my knives have to be whatever. You know, if you're into customs, you may say, dude, I haven't bought a knife for less than $600 or $700 in years. Okay, that's fine. So I'd like to hear some comments from you about price point. That's going to be the major difference between these two. What I'm going to point out to begin with, by way of introduction, is that despite the fact that there are a lot of similarities between these two, this one still costs a lot more, about double. Okay, so we've got about $100 here and about $200 here. So that's true, even though both of these knives have 3D Machine G10. Both of them have very, very good, almost super steels. Both of them are hard use lockback designs that are really meant to take a beating. Both of them are very utilitarian in their overall design, in their blade design as well, especially. And so there's a lot of similarity, and that's why I want to compare these two. Not only that, but let's be honest. In the knife world, if you're going to make a hard use lockback knife, you're kind of begging for a comparison to cold steel, aren't you? At least in my mind you are. So that's what we're going to do. All right, we're going to start off with size and weight, and we're going to start off with the TM1. I want to keep saying SR1 because I've had an SR1 before. Don't have it anymore, but it's going to slip out by if I slip up. Don't fill the comments with just that. I'd love to really hear more of a discussion of price point in the comments, but that's whatever you want, really. Anyway, let's come back to this. Size and weight on this guy is 8 inches overall, 3.5 inch blade, and 4.5 inch handle. Now, full disclosure, you know, to be a little more detail oriented, this is like a 1/16 under 3.5 inches, and the handle's like a 1/16 over 4.5 inches, but it kind of all comes out in the wash, all right? And the weight on this is 5 ounces. Now, let's switch over to the Cold Steel Ultimate Hunter. Size on this is 8.5 inches. Most of that is in the handle. The blade is still 3.5 inches. The handle is 5 inches. And the weight on this one is 4.8 ounces. And we commented on that for the kind of knife this is, for the durability you're getting, 4.8 ounces is a great weight. Really well done on the part of Cold Steel for this knife. Okay, now, I will say this. These are so close, okay, and the differences in size are really, you know, would you prefer a knife that's a little more efficient, that is, the blade to handle ratio is pretty efficient on this knife, versus a blade that gives you more handle real estate? Yeah, well, who knows about that, right? I really like both of them. I find them both fairly ergonomic, but when we talk about size and weight, we really care about that because we got to carry these around, right? This is going to be the knife you carry with you all over the place all the time. And so because of that, we care how much it weighs. Now, so let me say this, even though they're very, very close in weight, 0.2 ounces is basically nothing. The Cold Steel carries nicer, okay? It's a little slimmer. It's a little smaller when folded down in terms of, you know, this dimension, and therefore it actually, if you put both of these in your pocket, you notice the Cold Steel less, all right? The TM1 is a little bit bulky in pocket. So that would be about the only advantage you're getting with the Cold Steel in this particular sort of size and weight department. Let's go on to the blade, and we'll talk about the TM1 first, the way we've kind of set up for the whole. We're going to consistently do that, okay? Now, blade on this is Sleipner steel. It is a very thick piece of Sleipner steel, all right? A good 3/16 of an inch. You have a very high flat grind that, even though it's a good thick blade stock, it still allows for a nice thin edge geometry, and this does cut really well. Although I will say it's because of that thickness that you are going to eventually get to. If you're cutting fruit if you're cutting like cheese, something where you're going to bind, this knife is not going to perform as well as, say, a paramilitary 2 or something like that. Okay. Yesterday, for example, I was carrying the Real Steel H6, and that thing slices like a demon. Now, this doesn't slice as well as that, but for EDC tasks, it's very, very good. Now, the Sleipner steel is a very similar description, and in my experience, I have no problem agreeing with this. Essentially, they'll say that the Sleipner steel, if you read about it, is essentially a stainless D2. Okay? Well, guess what they say about CTSX HP, which is in the Ultimate Hunter? It's like D2, only stainless. Okay? Both of these are very, very good steels in terms of edge retention. Both of them do something that I really like to see in a knife, and that is they take an edge relatively easily, even though they hold it well. Okay? And I'm, you know, when I say they take an edge easily, I'm not saying, you know, hey, 5 minutes, a couple swipes on your sharp maker and it's done. They're not that soft. They are very hard, very durable steels. But comparatively to how well they hold their edge, some knives, in fact, a lot of knives, if it holds an edge really, really well, I start to go, this is going to be tough to sharpen. These two are not that bad, even though they do hold an edge very well. Sorry, I've sort of focused in on this, got into the steel too much. Let me come back very quickly to the blade shape here. Sort of a modified draw point, almost a reverse tanto. With that style, you get a lot of strength. Look at how much steel there is all the way out to the tip of this blade. Okay, so very, very good on strength. And that's part of the design. This is meant to be a tough, utilitarian blade shape, and I've got to say I really, really like the blade shape on this knife. It's sort of short and stocky and tough and useful. All of the things that I like to see in a blade. Now, what about the Ultimate Hunter? More traditional, okay, it certainly looks like a hunting knife. Both of these knives, I will say, the blades are not very intimidating or scary. You know, you're not going to upset too many sheeple if you pull one of these knives out and cut your, you know, whatever, your kid's yogurt tube open or something like that. No one at the park is going to freak out, or in McDonald's or wherever else you may happen to be, which I think is good. This blade has some similarities, okay? Yes, it's a more traditional drop point, but it is a flat grind. It is, even though they've gone for strength, they have managed to get it thin enough behind the edge that it cuts really well. Again, not as well as your Para 2 or your H6 from Real Steel or other blades, maybe your regular Sebenza 21 or something like that. But they do cut well, all right? Now, interesting, by the way, that they're so comparable in terms of that particular thing, and that's because they're both full flat ground, they're both fairly thick, and they're both designed to be pretty tough, durable type of blades. All right, let's see, CTSX HP, very good steel. This is one of those things where, you know, cold steel definitely deserves a gold star for switching to this steel. It's a fantastic steel. Better than a lot of the competitors are using, better than you would ever dream of getting for a lot of the price points that these are coming in at. Okay, so that's really, really cool. The big difference here is the belly, okay? And because of that extra belly, this knife is going to work for some things that this knife would not work well for, okay? If you're skinning an animal, if you're doing something that, you know, requires you to kind of rock the blade, this knife is not going to work as well as this one. You've got a little extra belly. So if you do the kind of cutting tasks that require that more exaggerated belly, this would be obviously the superior blade in that case. Now, in terms of just straight up comparison, I've got to give the edge to the TM1 in terms of blade because of a couple of cool things. Number one, I love this blade design. It's thick and beefy. It's different. You know, we don't see a ton of blades like this, and yet it's still very, very capable. It's still thin behind the edge, which I think is a huge win for Lionsteel. I've had other blades from them that were terrible in terms of edge geometry. So I'm going to say the blade goes to the TM1 largely for stylistic and somewhat for durability reasons. There's a ton of just look at the thickness on that blade stock. Crazy thick. So you're getting a big, heavy, beefy blade. This is heavy, this is durable, but not to the extent that this one is. Okay, so that's blade. Let's go on to lockup and deployment. Both of these are lockbacks. However, the TM1 is not a triad lock, although it would be amazing if somehow Lionsteel could convince Cold Steel to license a triad lock for this knife. This may be like, it would just put it in the stratosphere, okay? But it's not, it's a regular lockback. However, it's extremely well done. How many lockbacks can you do that with, okay? I will actually say this. This is the only lockback knife that I'll actually sit and kind of play with, you know, open and close, because it's very smooth. It's extremely precise. I'm going to try to do this without cutting myself, but let me show you that I can actuate this lock with all my fingers, except I'm sure I'm not going to be able to do it with my pinky finger. No, I can't. But all of my other fingers I can do it with no problem. So it's extremely perfect. Okay, let's just say that when you either lock or unlock this knife, it just feels like precision. All right, and I think there's a reason that Lionsteel was able to get that manufacturing award at Blade Show. So that's very well done. This is also a ball bearing pivot, which means it's very smooth. There you go. I'm trying to do this slowly so you can sort of see the blade move, but it is very smooth. Now, I will say this. The thumb disc is less than stellar, all right? It's okay. Now, this is not original to me, and I can't remember where I got it, but I did flip this disc around, okay? So it comes from the factory, the exact opposite of the way I have it here. I just flipped it the other way, and I find my thumb is able to sort of catch that little corner a lot better than when I got it from the factory, or when I got it from the guy I bought it from. Okay, so that's lockup and deployment on the TM1. It is ball bearing pivot. It is a regular lockback. However, even though I would say I would question the strength of most regular lockbacks, look at the thickness of this piece of steel. Okay, so that's pretty exceptional. I think we've got to at least admit that. Now, what about the Cold Steel? I will say Cold Steel this year is better than they've been. Not too many Cold Steels will drop the way that one does, like that. I can flip it open, but it takes a little wrist action. But it is not in any way, shape, or form as smooth as the TM1. And this lock, there's no way I'm opening it with even, yeah, I can do it with my pointer finger if I help a little bit. But if I do this kind of thing, I can just barely get it. No way I'm getting it with any other fingers. Normally, I've got to use either my thumb, or what I often do is use the knuckle of my thumb like this. And I've got a lot of Cold Steels, and I'm used to Cold Steels, but a lot of people have complained about just how tough that triad lock is. And it is. It's a very, very tight lock, okay? Partially, that's by design. They want it to be hard to actuate. Partially, it's the fact that the fit and finish on this locking mechanism is not in the same category as the one on this knife, okay? They're not the same. Both are good. The triad lock may be even a little stronger just because it's a phenomenal design for strength. But when it comes to just smoothness in the feel, there's no question that there's a significant difference in just the tolerances, in the precision of this knife versus this knife. Okay, so how do we rate these? Here's the thing. The things that I would dislike a little about this, I like to see a non-ball bearing pivot, especially in a hard use knife. I'm going to use this in a difficult environment. I really don't want the possibility of dirt and crap and junk getting into the ball bearings. So in that sense, I favor the non-ball bearing pivot. However, this one is very smooth and very comfortable and even very fast to actuate. So because there's like, you know, because they're too close to that, because of the varying, there's good things about this, there's good things about this, and because I don't have any definitive strength testing, I'm not going to go and destroy one of my knives to establish that. Both of these are very strong lockbacks, stronger than most of the lockbacks you're going to deal with, okay? So I'm going to call it a tie in terms of lockup and deployment. I know that sucks even after all that discussion, but I hope I've said a couple of things in there. And the reason I went a little longer there is because hopefully if you're considering one of these, I've mentioned whatever thing may be important to you, okay? Lockup and deployment, there you go. I'm gonna call it a tie. What about the handle? Okay, both of these are 3D Machine G10. Now, there's one huge factor with this handle that just puts the second kind of cool in terms of just pride of ownership and in terms of fit and finish and manufacturing prowess and all of that. You do have this monolithic G10 handle. That is, this was made from one piece of G10 and it was machined, and then this was all assembled. And that is a feat of manufacturing, okay? Amazing. Now, it's also very comfortable, but it is a little bit short. You can see that the fat of my hand is just kind of going. Now, one of the challenges that presents is there is this glass breaker on the tip, and for me to get that to be exposed, I have to change my grip, okay? And that's maybe less than ideal, but it's not the end of the world. Very comfortable. If I squeeze really, really hard on this, it doesn't do anything. It just feels comfortable still, okay? I have done some pretty hard cutting with this and had no issues whatsoever. The only complaint that I will make about this handle is the smoothness, okay? There are times where if I just hold this right and I'm trying to flip the knife open, I fail, not because my finger flips off the thumb disc, but because the rest of my hand actually moves on the handle and I can't get a good enough purchase. So that I think is a legitimate complaint. This is a little too smooth for me, where this has this great texturing, okay? While we're here, lanyard holes are basically the same. And pocket clip, they're both left or right side, tip up carry, and they both work really well. They're different. This is obviously deeper carry than this, but they both go in and out of pocket quite comfortably. Now, this handle is bigger. There's more real estate. Notice if I take a saber grip on this, I still have handle to work with. And if I take more of a hammer grip, you can really see there's a lot of handle here. Plus, there's the option to choke up on this knife, which does give me finer control, especially if this is with me, you know, and it's gonna be my only knife, then the option to choke up like this is really, really helpful, okay? So, how do the handles compare? Well, obviously, I don't think we can argue the fact that the manufacturing on this is way cooler. Pride of ownership on this is pretty high because of that cool manufacturing technique, but it doesn't do much for the practical usefulness of the knife, all right? So, on handle, I've got to give it to the cold steel because of the extra real estate, because of the extra, you know, maneuverability, where I've got a little more in terms of variance in what I can and can't do with the knife, okay? This one just gives me a little better variability and a little more comfort because of that extra size and length. And I'm a big fan of the handle on this knife, and I said that in the initial review. I think it's a real success. Now, again, these are very close in terms of handle. This one is just a teeny bit short. Now, if you had really big hands, this one could be a real issue for you because there's not a lot of handle here, okay? There just isn't. And the fact that they've even built this to have this choil, the choil is great, and it's going to keep you from going up onto the blade, which is what you want, but it moves your hand back, okay? And it does mean, again, that this already somewhat small handle is now even smaller. So that's the main reason that I'm going to go with the cold steel. Now, let's talk about our overall comparison, all right? And both of these, again, have a lot of similarity, but there are some big differences as well. Fit and finish, tolerance, manufacturing certainly is at a much higher level on the Lionsteel. I wouldn't, maybe not much, but on a higher level, okay? In terms of usefulness, in terms of durability, in terms of functionality, both of them are so close that it's really tough to call, all right? That brings us to price. And so if we're going to just compare these and say, hey, someone calls me up and they go, Kevin, I really need a hard use, good quality, reliable knife, I'm going to be much more likely to recommend the Ultimate Hunter than I am to recommend the TM1. Now, on the other hand, if someone says, hey, I've tried out some cold steels, but I want something a little higher end, I want something with a little more pride of ownership, something that you could call, you know, a high-end carry knife, yeah, would I recommend the TM1? Absolutely, I would recommend it. It is definitely a great knife, tons of cool factor, tons of sort of pride of ownership and interesting features, comfortable as can be. So there's a lot going for the TM1 as well, but for that extra stuff, and none of those things are really adding to the usefulness of the knife, you're paying high dollars, okay? You're adding another $100 to your price. So overall, I'm going to call the Ultimate Hunter a better knife with those qualifications that I gave you, where we're talking about sort of some specific considerations. All right, so there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. Love to hear some comments below, and we will talk to you soon.